When I realized the little surprise my daughter-in-law had given her mother, who had just lost her husband, I didn't cry. I just smiled and switched the bottles around. The scream that was heard that night in the house was my silent victory. But I never imagined that my son would kick me out of the house just for switching the bottles around. I don't remember the last time I smiled. Perhaps it was just before my husband Robert took his last breath in that hospital bed last year. I'm 66 years old, and I'm spending the autumn of my life as a stranger in this house in South Carolina, the house I built with my own hands. My house. Now it's my son David and his wife Claire's house. Claire is an impeccable woman like a porcelain doll, with a smile as sweet as honey, but a soul as cold as ice. Since Robert's funeral, she has made me feel like an excess in this house at every opportunity. "Marilyn," she would say, her voice velvety, but her orders like steel. "When guests come over, please stay in your room. It saddens David to see you so grief-stricken." And my son, David, he was captivated by his wife's brilliant charm. He didn't see the years I sacrificed for him, the sacrifices my husband and I made to be able to buy this house. He only saw his wife's need for privacy, and I was the obstacle to that privacy. I had learned to live with Claire's little cruelties. My favorite cup accidentally broken. My husband's photo removed from the study and stored in the dusty attic. They were attempts to slowly erase me. But I endured it all, until that Tuesday morning. When I entered the bathroom, I noticed that my shampoo bottle, which was always in the left corner of the shower, had been moved to the far right of the shelf. The cap wasn't properly closed. That cold feeling inside me, that alarm bell that hadn't failed me since my husband died, began to ring. That day, I said nothing. The next day, knowing Claire would go out for lunch, I slipped into the bathroom. I took her expensive shampoo, a French brand. It smelled different from mine. Then I took my own bottle. When I opened the cap and smelled it, beneath the floral scent, there was a sharp chemical smell that burned my throat. Just like hair removal creams. My blood ran cold. This was not an accident. It was a calculated and ruthless attack. It was aimed at my pride, at the last shred of dignity I had left. She planned to make a grieving woman lose her hair to kick her out of the house. I steadied my trembling hands. No, I wasn't going to cry. I had cried enough in this house. In that moment, that sacrificial mother, that silent widow inside me, died. In her place, someone who was planning her revenge was born. That morning, before the sun came up, before they both woke up, I slipped into the bathroom. Both bottles looked identical. One was my poison with a floral scent. The other was her expensive and supposedly luxurious shampoo. With a single quick and decisive movement, I switched the bottles around. I put her bottle on the left and mine on the right. That night at dinner, while David was excitedly talking about his new project, Claire suddenly brought her hand to her scalp. She frowned. "Claire, are you okay, honey?" David asked. Claire scratched again before she could answer. And then, when she pulled her hand away from her hair, she had strands and strands of shiny blonde hair in her palm. First, there was silence. Then came her scream when she jumped from her chair to look at herself in the mirror. It was a scream filled with pain and shock, one that shook the house to its foundations. David turned to me in shock. His eyes blazed with an accusatory fire. "Mother, what did you do?" I kept my composure. Not a single muscle in my face moved. I slowly put down my fork on my plate. "I just used my own shampoo, David." "Liar!" Claire screamed from the bathroom, her voice drowned by hysteria. "It was her! She hates me! I'm going bald! It was her!" David looked at his wife, with half her head bald and tears staining her face, and then at my calm face. He made his decision in that instant. "Pack your things," he told me, his voice with a coldness I didn't recognize. "David, please, she..." I told you to pack your things. I don't want a monster in this house. Get out! That night, I was thrown out into the street like a criminal by my own son, from the house I built with my husband. I stood at the door, with only a few dollars in my pocket. But there was something David didn't know. I hadn't fallen into Claire's trap. And that morning, before entering the bathroom, I had secretly placed my phone's camera among the towels in the closet. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. Now, they were going to learn how loud a mother's fury could be. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5. The rain started falling as I stood on that sidewalk, my suitcase growing heavy in my trembling hand. The house behind me, my house, the one Robert and I had built with our dreams and savings, glowed warmly through the windows. Inside, my son was probably comforting his sobbing wife, never once thinking about his mother standing in the cold October night. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I had cried enough tears to fill an ocean when Robert died. Tonight, something harder than grief settled in my chest. It was resolve. I walked 3 blocks to the only place I could think of, Maggie's house. Margaret Chen had been my closest friend for 30 years. She opened the door in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without a single question. "Tea first," she said firmly. Explanations later. Sitting in her warm kitchen, I finally told her everything. About Claire's subtle cruelties, about the hair removal cream in my shampoo, about switching the bottles, and about David throwing me out into the street like garbage. Maggie's face grew darker with each word. When I finished, she slammed her cup down so hard I thought it would shatter. "That little snake!" she hissed. "And David... Marilyn, I'm so sorry, but you have proof, right? You said you recorded something?" I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The video was there, time-stamped from yesterday morning. Claire, looking carefully around before entering the bathroom. Claire, taking a bottle from under the sink, a bottle clearly labeled as hair removal cream. Claire, carefully pouring it into my shampoo bottle, mixing it with a small stick, then hiding the evidence and walking out with a satisfied smile on her perfect face. "This is attempted assault," Maggie said, her voice tight with anger. "You need to go to the police." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "Not yet. David wouldn't believe it came from his precious Claire. He'd say I fabricated it somehow. I need him to see who she really is with his own eyes." Maggie studied me for a long moment. "You have a plan." It wasn't a question. She knew me too well. "I'm going to disappear for a while," I said slowly. "Let them think I'm gone for good. Claire will get comfortable. She always does. And when people get comfortable, they get careless." "Where will you go?" I thought about it. "My sister Linda, in Asheville. She's been asking me to visit for months. I'll stay with her, but I'll come back. I'll watch them, Maggie. I'll wait for Claire to reveal herself." Maggie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'll help you, whatever you need." That night, I sent David a single text message. "I'm leaving Charleston. Don't look for me. I won't burden you anymore." He didn't respond. Linda's house in Asheville, North Carolina, was everything my life in Charleston hadn't been lately. Peaceful. My younger sister had always been the free spirit of the family, and her cozy mountain cottage reflected that. Wind chimes sang on the porch, and the smell of her herb garden drifted through open windows. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, showing me to the guest room. "But Marilyn, are you sure about this plan? Watching and waiting? It could take months." "I have nothing but time now," I replied, setting down my suitcase. "And patience. Robert always said I had the patience of a saint." Linda smiled sadly. "Robert also said you had a spine of steel when you needed it. I think he'd be proud of what you're doing." "Would he?" I wondered that night, lying in the unfamiliar bed. Would Robert be proud that I'd manipulated the situation, even though Claire had started it? Would he be disappointed that I'd let our son throw me out without fighting back harder? No. Robert would have understood. He'd always understood me. The next morning, I started my research. Maggie had agreed to be my eyes and ears in Charleston. She lived only 2 streets away from David and Claire, and she had a talent for casual conversation that could extract information from anyone. Her first report came 3 days after I left. "Claire is playing the victim beautifully," Maggie said over the phone, her voice dripping with disgust. "She's wearing scarves and hats everywhere, telling everyone that you tried to poison her out of jealousy. Half the neighborhood thinks you're a monster." My hands tightened around the phone. "And David?" "David looks exhausted. He's been taking Claire to doctor after doctor. Apparently, her hair is growing back, but slowly. She's milking it for everything it's worth." "Has she mentioned me?" "Oh, yes. She told the ladies at book club that you were always resentful of her, that you never accepted her as David's wife, that you tried to drive her away from the beginning." Maggie paused. "Marilyn, she's rewriting history, making herself the innocent victim and you the evil mother-in-law." I closed my eyes. "Let her. The higher she climbs on that pedestal, the harder she'll fall." "There's something else," Maggie said carefully. "I saw her at the bank yesterday. She was arguing with the manager about something. Looked pretty heated. That caught my attention." "The bank?" "Yeah, I couldn't hear what it was about, but she stormed out looking furious." I filed that information away. "Claire and money? That was interesting. Robert and I had always been careful with our finances, and we'd made sure David knew the value of $1. But Claire came from a wealthy family, or so she'd always claimed. Why would she be arguing at a bank?" 2 weeks passed. I spent my days helping Linda in her garden and my evenings planning. I wasn't just going to expose Claire. I was going to understand her completely. "Know your enemy," Robert used to say when he played chess. "Know what drives them, what scares them, and what they'll do when cornered." Maggie's reports continued. Claire had started posting on social media about her traumatic experience with a toxic family member. She never named me directly, but everyone in Charleston knew who she meant. The comments were full of sympathy and support. But Maggie noticed something I would have missed. "Her posts are getting more frequent," she said, almost desperate, like she needs constant validation. "And Marilyn, I did some digging. Claire's family isn't wealthy at all. Her father is a used car salesman in Colombia. Her mother works at a grocery store." She lied? About everything. Her fancy boarding school, public high school, her degree from Duke, community college in Columbia. She's been playing a part since day one. The pieces were starting to come together. Claire wasn't just cruel, she was insecure. She'd built her entire identity on lies, and I represented a threat because I knew the real David, the David before he became successful. I knew that his success came from hard work and the foundation Robert and I gave him, not from Claire's imaginary connections and social climbing. "Keep watching," I told Maggie. "Especially her spending. If she's not from money, she might be spending David's." 3 days later, Maggie called with excitement in her voice. "You were right. I befriended the new clerk at Beaumont's, that expensive boutique downtown. Marilyn, Claire has been shopping there almost daily. Thousands of dollars on clothes, jewelry, handbags, all on credit cards." "David's credit cards?" "Has to be. And there's more. Remember that fight at the bank?" I asked around carefully. Apparently, there was an issue with a large withdrawal from David's business account. The bank flagged it as suspicious. My mind raced. "How large?" $20,000. I sat down hard on Linda's couch. $20,000. That was a significant amount, even for David's successful architecture firm. "Maggie, I need you to do something for me. Can you find out if David knows about this withdrawal?" "I'll try. But Marilyn, maybe it's time to come back. This is getting serious. She could bankrupt him. Not yet, I said firmly. I need more. I need undeniable proof that David can't ignore or explain away. Claire is smart enough to have covered some of her tracks. If I come back now with only suspicions and a video he might claim is edited, he'll just see it as me trying to cause trouble. But I was worried. Not for myself, for David. He was my son, and despite everything, I loved him. Claire was a parasite, slowly draining everything good from his life, and he couldn't see it because he was blinded by her beauty and charm. That night, I made a decision. I was coming back to Charleston, but not to confront them. I was going to investigate Claire myself. I returned to Charleston on a gray November morning. Linda had tried to convince me to wait, to think things through, but I couldn't stay away any longer. My son was in trouble, whether he knew it or not. Maggie picked me up from the bus station and drove me straight to her house. "You're sure about this?" she asked for the 10th time. "I'm sure. I can't sit in Asheville while Claire destroys my son's life." "All right, but you're staying with me, and you're being careful. If David or Claire see you..." "They won't. I know this town better than anyone. I grew up here." Over the next week, I became a ghost. I watched David's house from a distance, noting the patterns. David left for work at 7 every morning. Claire usually stayed home until around 10, then went out for what she called her errands. I followed her. The first day, she went to Beaumont's boutique, just as Maggie had said. I watched through the window as she tried on dress after dress, finally buying 3 of them without even looking at the price tags. The clerk wrapped them with practiced efficiency, clearly used to Claire's excessive shopping. The second day, she met a man at an upscale cafe on King Street. They sat at a corner table, and their conversation looked intense. The man was handsome, probably in his late 30s, wearing an expensive suit. He reached across the table and took Claire's hand. She didn't pull away. My heart pounded. Was Claire having an affair? I took out my phone and snapped several photos, making sure to capture their faces clearly. The third day, I followed her to a law office. She was inside for over an hour. When she came out, she looked satisfied, almost smug. That evening, I met with Maggie to share what I'd discovered. "I think she's planning something big," I said, showing her the photos. The shopping sprees, the mysterious man, the lawyer visit, it all adds up to something. Maggie studied the photo of the man. "Wait, I know him. That's Marcus Brennan. He's a real estate developer. Pretty wealthy, recently divorced." She looked up at me with wide eyes. "Marilyn, you don't think..." "I think Claire is planning to leave David, but not until she's taken everything she can from him first." We sat in silence, the weight of that realization settling over us. "We need to find out what she discussed with that lawyer," I said finally. "Can you help me?" Maggie bit her lip. "My nephew works at a law firm downtown. Not the same one, but he knows people. I can ask around discreetly." "Do it. And Maggie? Thank you. I couldn't do this without you." She squeezed my hand. "That's what friends are for. Besides, I never liked that girl. Too perfect, you know? People who seem too perfect are usually hiding something rotten underneath." The next day brought an unexpected development. I was having coffee at a small cafe far from David's neighborhood when I overheard 2 women talking at the next table. "Did you hear about Claire Patterson's fundraiser?" one of them said. My ears perked up immediately. "Oh yes, for cancer research, right? So noble of her, especially after everything she's been through with her toxic mother-in-law." I gripped my coffee cup so hard I thought it might crack. "She's raising money at the Charleston Hotel next Friday. Tickets are $500 each. My husband bought 2. $500 per ticket? For a fundraiser Claire was organizing? Something about that felt wrong. I spent the next few days researching Claire's fundraiser. According to the glossy invitations posted on social media, the event was to raise money for the Palmetto Cancer Research Foundation. The venue was indeed the Charleston Hotel's Grand Ballroom, and from the guest list being shared online, It looked like half of Charleston's wealthy elite would be attending. But when I called the Palmetto Cancer Research Foundation directly, pretending to be interested in donating, the woman on the phone had never heard of Claire Patterson or any fundraiser at the Charleston Hotel. "We don't have any events scheduled for next week," she said pleasantly. "Are you sure you have the right organization?" I thanked her and hung up, my suspicions confirmed. Claire was running a fake charity event. This was it. This was the proof I needed. But I had to be smart about how to expose her. If I went to David now, he'd just think I was making things up out of spite. I needed to catch her in the act, publicly, where there would be witnesses and no way for her to lie her way out. "I need to get into that fundraiser," I told Maggie that evening. "How? You can't exactly walk in. Claire will see you immediately." "Not if I'm in disguise." Maggie stared at me. "You're serious?" "Completely. I need to see what she's planning, and I need to be there when it all falls apart. Will you help me?" Maggie thought for a moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. "My niece is a makeup artist, works in theater. If anyone can make you unrecognizable, it's her." 2 days before the fundraiser, I sat in Maggie's niece's apartment while she worked her magic. She dyed my gray hair a rich auburn, styled it in a sleek bob completely different from my usual simple cut, and applied makeup that took years off my face. When she was done, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. "You look sophisticated, mysterious," she said with satisfaction. "And at least 10 years younger. Now for the clothes." Maggie had borrowed an elegant black evening gown from another friend, along with the kind of jewelry Claire would approve of, understated but expensive looking. When I was fully transformed, even Maggie did a double take. "If I didn't know it was you, I'd never guess," she said. "But Marilyn, how are you getting a ticket? They're $500, and if you buy one now, your name will be on the guest list." I smiled. "I'm not buying a ticket. I'm going to walk in with a group and blend in. These charity events are always chaotic at the beginning. No one checks too carefully." It was risky, but it was my only option. The night of the fundraiser arrived. I was so nervous I could barely eat dinner. Maggie drove me to the Charleston Hotel and parked where we could watch the entrance. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "We could just go to David with what we know." "He wouldn't believe me. He needs to see it himself." At 7 o'clock, the guests started arriving, expensive cars pulling up, women in glittering gowns, men in tuxedos. I watched Claire greet people at the entrance, wearing a stunning silver dress that probably cost more than my monthly expenses. Her hair had grown back enough to style elegantly. She looked like Charleston royalty. I waited until a large group arrived together, laughing and talking loudly. I slipped out of Maggie's car and walked quickly toward them, timing it perfectly so I entered the hotel lobby surrounded by people. The woman at the check-in table barely glanced at me as I moved past with the crowd into the ballroom. Inside, the room was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, white-clothed tables, a string quartet playing softly. There must have been 200 people there, maybe more. All of them thinking they were donating to cancer research, all of them completely fooled by Claire's performance. I found a seat at a table in the back corner, where I could observe without being too visible. David was at the head table with Claire, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. He'd never liked formal events. Claire kept touching his arm, laughing at something someone said, playing the perfect wife. The evening progressed with dinner and speeches. Several people spoke about the importance of cancer research, and each time, I felt sicker. These people genuinely cared about the cause. They had no idea they were being scammed. Finally, Claire took the microphone. She looked radiant, confident, completely in control. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," she began, her voice warm and sincere. "As many of you know, this cause is deeply personal to me. My late father-in-law, Robert Patterson, passed away last year from cancer. Watching my family go through that pain was devastating. Tonight, we honor his memory by fighting the disease that took him from us. I felt tears spring to my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure rage. How dare she use Robert's death like this? How dare she exploit his memory for her scheme? My hands trembled in my lap, and I had to force myself to stay seated and quiet. Claire continued her speech, weaving a beautiful story about loss and hope and the power of community coming together. She was good, I had to admit. She had the entire room captivated, hanging on her every word. Even David looked moved, gazing at his wife with pride and love. Every penny raised tonight will go directly to the Palmetto Cancer Research Foundation, Claire said, her voice thick with fake emotion. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can save lives. The room erupted in applause. People stood, reaching for their checkbooks and phones. I watched in horror as they began pledging additional donations beyond their ticket prices. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. One elderly couple pledged $25,000. This was worse than I'd imagined. Claire wasn't just scamming a few $100s, she was stealing hundreds of thousands. I had to act now. But I needed proof, something concrete that couldn't be denied or explained away. I pulled out my phone and began recording the scene discreetly. Claire was collecting checks and promises of wire transfers, writing everything down in a leather-bound notebook, her smile never wavering. Then I saw him, the man from the cafe, Marcus Brennan, standing near the bar. He wasn't mingling with the other guests. Instead, he was watching Claire with an expression that was almost possessive. And when their eyes met across the room, Claire gave him the smallest nod. That's when I knew. This wasn't just Claire's plan. Marcus was in on it too. They were partners, probably planning to take the money and disappear together. I needed to get closer, to hear what was being said. I stood carefully and moved toward the bar area, staying in the shadows as much as possible. A few people glanced at me, but no one really looked. In a room full of Charlestons, elite, I was just another wealthy widow in an expensive dress. Marcus was on his phone now, speaking quietly. I edged closer, pretending to examine the dessert table nearby. Transfer should be complete by Monday, he was saying. She'll have everything wrapped up after the event. Then we're clear. My heart pounded. I recorded every word on my phone, hidden in my clutch purse. The Bahamas property is ready, Marcus continued. Once she files for divorce and gets the house settlement, we're set. Patterson won't know what hit him. There it was. The full plan laid out in Marcus's careless confidence. Claire was going to steal the fundraiser money, divorce David, take as much as she could in the settlement, and run off with Marcus to the Bahamas. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to David right then and tell him everything. But I forced myself to wait. I needed more. Needed something that couldn't be disputed or explained away. The evening wore on. Claire made her rounds, collecting more donations, more promises. I estimated she'd collected over $300,000 by the time dessert was served. Every cent of it based on lies and the exploitation of Robert's memory. Finally, around 10 o'clock, I saw my opportunity. Claire excused herself from the head table and headed toward the hallway that led to the restrooms. I followed at a distance, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She stopped before reaching the restrooms and slipped into a small alcove where there was a door marked, "Staff only." I pressed myself against the wall and waited. Moments later, Marcus joined her. I crept closer, staying hidden behind a large decorative plant. "How much?" Marcus asked. $340,000, maybe more," Claire said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. "Plus whatever David's house sells for. I met with the lawyer again yesterday. Divorce papers are ready to file. Once this is done, I'll tell him I need space to heal from the trauma his mother caused. I'll move to that rental property you found, file for divorce the next week, and be gone before he can fight the settlement. And the fundraiser money? Goes into the offshore account we set up, untraceable. By the time anyone realizes there was no donation to Palmetto, we'll be long gone." Marcus laughed. "You're brilliant. You know that?" "I know," Claire said. "I've been planning this since the day I married him. David Patterson was always just a meal ticket, a means to an end. Now I'm cashing out. I heard the sound of them kissing, and I had to cover my mouth to keep from gasping in shock and disgust. Every word was recorded on my phone. Every damning confession captured. They parted ways, Claire returning to the ballroom and Marcus slipping out a side exit. I waited a full minute before moving, my mind racing. I had everything I needed now. The video of Claire putting hair removal cream in my shampoo. Photos of her with Marcus. Recordings of their conversations. Proof that the charity was fake. But how to reveal it all? I couldn't just walk up to David in the middle of the fundraiser. He'd be defensive, embarrassed in front of all these people, and Claire would find a way to spin it, to make herself the victim again. No, I needed to do this carefully, strategically. I slipped out of the ballroom and found a quiet corner in the hotel lobby. I pulled out my phone and sent everything, every photo, every video, every recording, to Maggie with a message. If anything happens to me, give this to the police. Then I sent a text to David. Come to room 412 immediately. It's about Claire. Come alone. I'd reserved the room that morning under a fake name, paying cash. Now I waited. 20 agonizing minutes passed. I paced the hotel room, rehearsing what I would say, how I would show him the truth without him shutting down immediately. My son was a good man, but he was also proud and stubborn, traits he'd inherited from his father and me. A knock at the door made me jump. I checked the peephole. It was David, alone, looking confused and worried. I opened the door. His eyes went wide. Mother? For a moment, he just stared at me, taking in my transformed appearance. Then his face hardened. What are you doing here? How did you even— Please, David, just come in and listen. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. He hesitated, then stepped inside, his jaw tight with anger. You shouldn't be here. After what you did to Claire? I didn't do anything to Claire, I said firmly. She did it to herself. But I understand why you don't believe me. That's why I'm going to show you proof. I picked up my phone and handed it to him. Watch this first. He looked at the screen suspiciously, but he pressed play. I watched his face as he viewed the video of Claire pouring hair removal cream into my shampoo bottle. His expression shifted from skepticism to confusion to dawning horror. This could be fake, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Look at the timestamp, David. It was recorded the day before I supposedly attacked her. She set a trap for me, and when I turned it back on her, she used it to get rid of me. I paused. Look at the metadata if you don't believe me. Have an expert examine it. It's real. David's hands were shaking. Why would Claire do this? Because she wanted me gone. I was in the way of her plans. I took a breath. And there's more. Much more. But you need to prepare yourself, David. What I'm about to show you will change everything. I showed him the photos of Claire and Marcus. His face went pale. Then I played the recording from tonight. The one where Claire and Marcus discussed their entire plan. The fake charity, the divorce, the offshore account, running away to the Bahamas. With each revelation, David seemed to age years. He sank down onto the edge of the bed, his phone gripping the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. $300,000, he whispered. That's what she said? $300,000 from people who think they're helping cancer research? Using Dad's death? Yes, I said gently. I'm so sorry, David. I know this is— She said I was just a meal ticket. His voice broke. That she's been planning this since we got married. 4 years. 4 years of my life with someone who never loved me at all. I sat down beside him, wanting to comfort him, but not sure if he'd accept it. David, I know I should have come to you sooner with the video of the shampoo. But I knew you wouldn't believe me without more proof. I knew Claire would find a way to explain it away, to make me seem like the villain. He was quiet for a long time, just staring at the phone in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I threw you out, my own mother. I chose to believe her over you, and I threw you out into the street. You didn't know. I should have known. He stood abruptly, began pacing. I should have seen it. The way she always wanted you gone, the way she changed whenever you were around. God, how could I have been so blind? She's very good at manipulation, David. She fooled a lot of people tonight. He stopped pacing and looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time since I'd opened the door. Your hair? Your dress? You've been investigating her, haven't you? How long have you been back in Charleston? A couple of weeks. I've been watching, gathering evidence. I needed to protect you, even if you didn't want my protection. David's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I failed you. I failed Dad's memory. I stood and pulled him into a hug, something I hadn't been able to do in months. He was taller than me now, had been since he was 16, but in that moment, he felt like my little boy again. We're going to fix this, I said firmly, but we need to act quickly. If Claire and Marcus realize we know, they'll run. David finished. He pulled back, wiping his eyes. What do we do? First, you need to go back downstairs and act like nothing's wrong. Can you do that? He nodded slowly. Yes, but Mom, what about the money? All those people donated in good faith. If the charity is fake, we're going to make sure every penny is returned, I said. But we need to catch Claire in the act of transferring the money. That's solid proof of fraud. When is she planning to deposit the checks? Tomorrow morning. She told me she wanted to go to the bank first thing to deposit everything while it was fresh in everyone's minds. David's expression hardened. She was probably planning to deposit it into that offshore account? Perfect. We'll go to the police tonight with all this evidence. They'll be able to stop the transfer and arrest both Claire and Marcus before they can run. David pulled out his own phone. I'm calling Detective Morrison. He's an old friend from college. He'll know what to do. As David made the call, I sat back down on the bed, exhausted but relieved. The truth was finally coming out. But a small part of me ached for my son, for the pain of betrayal he was feeling. No mother wants to see her child hurt, even when exposing that hurt is necessary. Detective Morrison agreed to meet us at the police station immediately. David went back downstairs to make an excuse to Claire about why he'd been gone so long. He told her he'd taken an important work call, while I slipped out through a side exit where Maggie was waiting with her car. The police station was quiet at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. Detective Morrison was waiting for us in a conference room, a solid man in his 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. David, he said, shaking my son's hand. It's been too long. I wish it were under better circumstances. You and me both, David replied. This is my mother, Marilyn Patterson. Mrs. Patterson, David's told me a bit about the situation over the phone. Why don't you walk me through everything from the beginning? For the next 2 hours, I laid it all out. The hair removal cream incident, Claire's lies about her background, her excessive spending, her relationship with Marcus Brennan, and finally, tonight's fraudulent fundraiser. I showed him every piece of evidence, the videos, the photos, the recordings. Detective Morrison's expression grew graver with each revelation. This is substantial, he said finally. Wire fraud, identity theft possibly, definitely embezzlement, and that's just for starters. He looked at David. I'm sorry, son. This is going to get complicated. What happens now? David asked. We need to move quickly. If they're planning to transfer the money Monday morning, we need to freeze the accounts tonight and get warrants issued for their arrest. Morrison checked his watch. I'll need to wake up a judge, but given the amount of money involved and the flight risk, I don't think that'll be a problem. What about the people who donated? I asked. They need to know the truth. We'll be issuing a statement first thing Monday morning. The money will be returned to the donors once we've secured it as evidence. Morrison stood. I need you both to give formal statements. This is going to be a long night." He wasn't wrong. It was nearly 4 a.m. when we finally left the police station. David drove me back to Maggie's house in silence. As we pulled into the driveway, he turned to me. "She'll be wondering where I am," he said quietly. "I told her I was going back to the office to handle an emergency project. I should get home before she gets suspicious." "Be careful, David. Don't let her know that you know." "I won't." He paused. "Will you come to the house Monday morning, when they arrest her? I think I need you there." "Of course," I said, touching his hand. "I'll be there." I watched him drive away, then went inside where Maggie was waiting up despite the late hour. "Well?" she asked anxiously. "It's happening. The police are moving forward. Claire and Marcus will be arrested Monday." Maggie let out a long breath. "Thank God. That woman has had this coming for a long time." I collapsed onto her couch, suddenly feeling every one of my 66 years. "I can't believe it's almost over." "How's David handling it?" "He's devastated, betrayed, angry, but he'll be okay. He's strong, like his father." "And you? How are you handling it?" I thought about that. "I feel strange. Relieved, yes. Vindicated, but also sad. I never wanted David to be hurt like this. I never wanted to be right about Claire." Maggie sat beside me and took my hand. "You saved him, Marilyn. If you hadn't figured out what she was planning, she would have taken everything and disappeared. David would have been left with nothing. No money, no house, no dignity. You gave him the truth, even though it hurt. I just hope he can forgive me for not telling him sooner. He already has. I could see it in his eyes when he dropped you off. That boy loves you, Marilyn. He never stopped." I leaned my head on Maggie's shoulder, letting the tears finally come. They were tears of relief, of exhaustion, of hope that maybe finally things could start to heal. Saturday and Sunday crawled by. Detective Morrison called Sunday afternoon to confirm that warrants had been issued for both Claire's and Marcus's arrests. The plan was to arrest them separately Monday morning, Marcus at his office and Claire at the house when she attempted to go to the bank. "David will need to let her think everything is normal," Morrison warned. "No unusual behavior. Can he do that?" "He can," I assured him, hoping I was right. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and drizzling rain. Maggie drove me to David's house, my old house, at 8 o'clock. David had told Claire he was leaving early for a meeting, so she wouldn't be suspicious when the police arrived. We parked down the street where we could see the front door. 2 unmarked police cars were already in position. Detective Morrison was in one of them. At 8:30, the front door opened. Claire stepped out, dressed impeccably as always, carrying a designer handbag and an expensive leather portfolio that undoubtedly contained all the checks and donation pledges from Friday night. She walked toward her car with purpose, keys in hand. She almost looked happy, probably imagining the new life she was about to start with Marcus in the Bahamas. She never made it to the car. 4 officers emerged from the unmarked vehicles simultaneously, moving with practiced precision. Claire froze, her hand on the car door handle, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion to growing panic. "Claire Patterson?" Detective Morrison called out, showing his badge. "Yes? What is this about?" She tried to maintain her composure, that same sweet smile she used to charm everyone, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "You're under arrest for wire, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent." As Morrison continued reading her rights, Claire's face transformed. The mask finally slipped completely. Gone was the sweet, innocent victim. In its place was raw fury. "This is insane!" she screamed. "I haven't done anything wrong. This is a mistake." "No mistake, Mrs. Patterson. We have substantial evidence of your fraudulent charity event, your plans to embezzle the donations, and your conspiracy with Marcus Brennan." Morrison nodded to one of the officers, who took the portfolio from Claire's grip. "We'll be confiscating these materials as evidence. You can't do this. David? Where's David? He'll tell you this is crazy. On cue, David's car pulled into the driveway. Claire's face flooded with relief when she saw him get out. She actually thought he was going to save her. David, thank God! These people are trying to arrest me. Tell them they're making a mistake. David walked toward her slowly, his face expressionless. When he reached her, he looked at her with such cold disappointment that even I felt it from down the street. There's no mistake, Claire, he said quietly. I know everything. The fake charity, Marcus, your plan to take the money and run, all of it. Claire's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. David, no, whatever you think you know, it's not. It's that woman, your mother. She's poisoning you against me. She's lying. My mother didn't lie, David said, his voice getting harder. You did. About everything. About your background. About loving me. About the charity. About the shampoo incident. Everything that's come out of your mouth since the day I met you has been a lie. That's not true. I love you. No, you don't. You said so yourself. I was just a meal ticket, a means to an end. You told Marcus that Friday night. We have it recorded. The color drained from Claire's face. She looked around wildly, as if searching for an escape route. When she saw me getting out of Maggie's car, her face contorted with hate. You! She shrieked. This is all your fault. You've been trying to destroy me from the beginning. You jealous, bitter old woman. I walked toward her calmly, Maggie at my side. No, Claire. I simply revealed what you already were. You destroyed yourself. I should have put more of that cream in your shampoo. I should have made you completely bald. I should have... Careful, Detective Morrison interrupted. You're confessing to assault in front of multiple witnesses. Claire seemed to realize her mistake. She clamped her mouth shut, but the damage was done. The officers put her in handcuffs and began leading her to one of the cars. Wait, she called out, turning back to David. David, please, don't do this. I'll pay back the money. I'll make it right. We can work through this. For better or worse, remember? You promised. David stood there for a long moment, and I could see the war happening inside him. Despite everything, some part of him still wanted to believe in the woman he'd married, the life he'd thought they were building together. But then he squared his shoulders, and I saw my son, the strong, principled man Robert and I had raised, win that internal battle. You broke those vows the moment you started lying to me, he said. Goodbye, Claire. As they drove her away, David stood in the driveway, watching the car disappear around the corner. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking his suit, but he didn't seem to notice. I approached him carefully. David? He turned to me, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. It's really over, isn't it? Yes. But you're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. He pulled me into a fierce hug, and I could feel him shaking. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything, for not believing you, for throwing you out, for choosing her over you. I'm so sorry. Shh. It's over now. We'll get through this together. Detective Morrison came over after the cars had left. Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Patterson, we're going to need both of you to come to the station later today to finalize your statements. We've also arrested Marcus Brennan at his office. Both of them will be held without bail, given the flight risk. What happens to the money? David asked. We've frozen all accounts connected to both suspects. The donations will be returned to the donors within a few weeks once we've processed everything as evidence. You'll also need to contact your bank about any joint accounts with your wife and any credit cards she had access to. David nodded numbly. Thank you, Detective. After Morrison left, the three of us stood there in the rain, David, Maggie, and me. My old house loomed behind us, filled with memories both good and bad. I think, David said slowly, I'd like to sell this house, start fresh somewhere. Are you sure? I asked. This was your father's and my house, your childhood home. And it's full of Claire now. Every room has her touch on it, her choices, her presence. I can't stay here. He looked at me. Unless, would you want it back? I thought about it. Once upon a time, this house had been my whole world. But that Marilyn, the one who'd lived here with Robert, who'd raised David in these rooms, she was gone. I'd changed too much in the past few months. No, I said finally. You're right. We both need a fresh start. Sell it. Use the money to rebuild your life. Will you help me find a new place? A place we can both live in? He smiled for the first time that morning, though it was sad around the edges. I'd like you to come home, Mom. Really home, not as a guest or an inconvenience, as family. Tears filled my eyes. I'd like that very much. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, police statements, and damage control. The news of Claire's fraud spread through Charleston like wildfire. The local papers ran headlines like "Charity Scam Rocks Charleston Elite" and "Society Wife Arrested for Elaborate Fraud." The donors were initially shocked and angry, but Detective Morrison's quick action in freezing the accounts meant that most of them received their full donations back. Many of them reached out to David personally to express their support and their apologies for believing Claire's lies about me. "Mrs. Patterson," one elderly woman said when she called the house, "I'm so ashamed. Claire told me you were unstable, that you'd tried to harm her out of jealousy. I spread those stories to my friends. I owe you an enormous apology." "You were deceived by someone very skilled at deception," I told her gently. "There's no need to apologize." But it felt good to hear it anyway, to know that my name was being cleared in the community I'd lived in for over 40 years. The trial was set for early spring, but Claire's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. She was facing serious prison time, potentially up to 20 years for all the charges combined. Marcus Brennan was in similar trouble, and according to Detective Morrison, the two of them were already turning on each other, each trying to pin more of the blame on the other. "Typical," Maggie said when she heard. "Thieves with no honor." David threw himself into work, using the long hours at his architecture firm as a way to process everything. But in the evenings, he came home to Maggie's house where I was still staying, and we talked. Really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. "I think I knew something was wrong," he admitted one night over dinner. "Not about the fraud or Marcus, but about Claire, about us. She was always so focused on appearances, on what people thought, on having the right clothes and the right friends. I told myself that was just who she was, that I should appreciate her social skills. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I just didn't want to see it. Love makes us blind sometimes," I said. "You wanted to believe in her, in your marriage. That's not a weakness, David. That's being human." "But I threw you out, Mom. I chose her lies over your truth. How can you forgive that?" "Because you're my son, and I love you. Because when you finally saw the truth, you did the right thing. That's what matters." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this up to you. You don't have to, but I wouldn't say no to you helping me find a good hairdresser. I think I'd like to keep this auburn color for a while." He laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from him in months. It sounded like hope. By December, we'd found a new house together. It was smaller than the old one, a charming craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood on the other side of Charleston. It had a beautiful garden that reminded me of the one Robert and I had planted years ago, and a sunroom where I could read and paint, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for. "It's perfect," I said when David showed it to me. "It can be your house?" he said. "I'll pay for it, but it'll be in your name. You'll never have to worry about anyone taking your home from you again." "Our house," I corrected. "We're family. We do this together." The house on Maple Street sold quickly, and we were grateful to be rid of it. Claire had left her mark on every room, but more importantly, It represented a chapter of David's life that needed to close. The divorce papers were filed in January. Claire tried to contest it from jail, claiming she deserved part of the house sale and David's business assets, but her lawyer advised her that given the circumstances, she had no leg to stand on. The divorce was finalized in February, and David was finally free. The trial began in March. I attended every day, sitting in the back of the courtroom with Maggie. Claire looked different, thinner, her hair in a simple ponytail, wearing a plain dress instead of her usual designer outfits. She avoided looking at me, but several times I caught her staring at David with an expression that might have been regret, but could just as easily have been resentment at being caught. The prosecution presented all our evidence, the videos, the recordings, the financial records showing the offshore accounts and the fake charity. Expert witnesses testified about the hair removal cream analysis, about Marcus and Claire's relationship, about the paper trail of lies and fraud. Claire's lawyer tried to paint her as a woman driven to desperate acts by an overbearing mother-in-law and a neglectful husband, but the jury didn't buy it. The evidence was too overwhelming, her confession to Marcus too damning. Marcus tried to testify that it was all Claire's idea, that he'd just been helping a friend, but the financial records showed he'd been actively involved in setting up the offshore accounts and finding the property in the Bahamas. His betrayal of Claire might have lightened his sentence slightly, but he was still found guilty on all counts. On a rainy April afternoon, the verdicts came in. Claire was found guilty of wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and assault. Marcus was found guilty of fraud and conspiracy. The judge sentenced Claire to 15 years in federal prison. Marcus received 12 years. As they led her away in handcuffs, Claire finally looked directly at me. Whatever I expected to see, hatred, anger, perhaps even remorse, wasn't there. Instead, there was just emptiness, as if something fundamental inside her had broken. Or maybe, I thought, there had never been anything there to begin with. Maybe Claire had always been empty, just very good at hiding it. Life began to settle into a new rhythm after the trial. David threw himself into his work with renewed energy, but this time it was different. He wasn't hiding anymore. He came home for dinner every night, and we'd sit in the sunroom of our new house, talking about our days, planning the garden for summer, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. "I forgot what this felt like," he said one evening in May. "Just being at peace, being home." "Your father and I used to sit like this every evening," I told him. "After you went to bed, we'd have tea and talk about nothing and everything. Those were some of my favorite moments." "Tell me about him," David said suddenly. "About Dad. Real stories, not just the polished memories we tell at holidays. I want to know who he really was." So I did. I told him about the time Robert had tried to surprise me with breakfast in bed on our anniversary and had somehow managed to set off the smoke alarm at 6 a.m. About how he'd cried when David was born, not the dignified single tear he'd admitted to, but full-on sobbing with joy. About how he'd been terrible at dancing, but would twirl me around the kitchen anyway whenever a good song came on the radio. "He would be proud of you," I said, "for how you handled all of this, for choosing truth over comfort." "I hope so," David said quietly. "I feel like I let him down. Let both of you down." "David, look at me." I waited until he met my eyes. "You made a mistake. You trusted the wrong person and didn't see the truth until it was almost too late. But you did see it. You did the right thing when it mattered most. That's what your father would care about." Over the next few months, I watched my son heal. It wasn't a straight line. There were bad days when the betrayal hit him fresh, when he questioned everything about those 4 years with Claire. But slowly, gradually, he began to smile more, laugh more, be more like the David I remembered from before Claire. He started dating again in the fall, tentatively at first. He met a woman named Sarah at an architecture conference, a structural engineer with a warm smile and a no-nonsense attitude. She knew about Claire and the trial. It had been too public to hide. But she didn't judge him for it. Everyone makes mistakes, she told him on their third date, which he'd nervously admitted to me about afterward. What matters is what you do after. I liked Sarah immediately when David brought her to meet me. She was nothing like Claire. She wore practical clothes, spoke directly, laughed loudly, and when she talked about her work, her eyes lit up with genuine passion. She treated me with respect, but not deference, asking my opinion, but not requiring my approval. She's good for him, Maggie observed after having dinner with all of us one evening. She's real. Yes, I agreed. She is. As winter approached again, nearly a year after that awful night when I'd been thrown out into the rain, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the investigation, the trial, all of it had led to this moment, sitting in my sunroom with a cup of tea, watching the first snow of the season begin to fall. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made me answer it. Mrs. Patterson? The voice was female, hesitant. This is Warden Bradley from the Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee. I'm calling regarding Claire Patterson. My heart skipped. Is she all right? She's fine, physically, but she's requested to speak with you. You're under no obligation to accept, of course. Given the circumstances, we'd understand if you declined. I sat there for a long moment, watching the snow fall. What could Claire possibly want to say to me after everything? Part of me wanted to refuse, to leave that chapter firmly closed. But another part, the part that had spent months investigating her, trying to understand her, that part was curious. I'll come, I said. When? This Friday, if that works for you. Visiting hours are from 9 to 3. After I hung up, I sat for a while thinking. Should I tell David? Would he want to come? Or would it just open old wounds? When he came home that evening, I decided to tell him. To my surprise, he wanted to go too. I need closure, he said. I need to hear what she has to say. Maybe it'll help me finally move on completely. So on Friday morning, David and I made the drive to Tallahassee. It was a long drive, almost 6 hours, and we spent it talking about everything except Claire. About Sarah, about David's latest project designing a community center, about my painting classes I'd started taking. The prison was exactly what you'd expect. Gray, imposing, surrounded by fences and security. We went through all the protocols, the searches, the metal detectors, until finally we were led to a visiting room divided by glass panels. Claire was already there when we arrived. She looked different from the woman I'd seen at the trial. Her hair was longer, pulled back in a simple braid. She wore a prison uniform with no makeup. Without all the designer clothes and professional styling, she looked younger, but also harder, the life she'd been living etched into the lines around her eyes. When she saw us, something flickered across her face. Not quite emotion, but an acknowledgement at least. We sat down across from her, picking up the phones that would allow us to talk through the glass. Thank you for coming, Claire said. Her voice was different too, quieter, less performative. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either, I admitted. Why did you ask to see us? Claire looked down at her hands, and for a long moment she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear it. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not the fake kind I was going to try to use to manipulate you into helping me. Just a real apology. David and I exchanged glances. This was not what I'd expected. I've had a lot of time to think in here, Claire continued. A lot of time to look at my life and the choices I made. The things I did to you, Mrs. Patterson, the way I treated you. She shook her head. There's no excuse for it. I was cruel because I saw you as a threat to my plans. You knew David before he became successful, before he had money. You represented a past where he was just a regular person, and I needed him to be more than that. I needed him to be the rich, successful husband who could give me the life I thought I deserved. Why? David asked, speaking for the first time. Why did you marry me if you never loved me? Claire looked at him, and for the first time, I saw genuine emotion in her face. Shame, regret, something real. Because you were kind to me. Because when I met you at that fundraiser 3 years ago, and I lied about my background, about my family, about everything, you believed me. You looked at me like I was special. And for someone who'd spent her whole life pretending to be someone she wasn't, that felt like love. She paused, collecting herself. But it wasn't love. Real love would have meant being honest with you, being myself. I didn't know how to do that. I'd been lying about who I was for so long that I didn't even know who the real Claire was anymore. Maybe there never was a real Claire. Maybe I've always just been a collection of lies and performances. What about Marcus? I asked. Marcus was another lie, another performance. I thought if I could just get enough money, if I could run away to some beautiful place and start over, then I could finally be happy. But I know now that I would have just kept lying, kept performing, kept being empty inside. She looked directly at me. The shampoo thing? That was the worst thing I've ever done. Trying to make a woman who'd just lost her husband lose her hair, her dignity, just so I could have a house to myself. I think about it every day, about how cruel that was, how unnecessary. You could have just talked to us, David said, his voice thick with emotion. If you were unhappy, if you felt like Mom being there was a problem, we could have worked something out. We could have helped her find her own place or... I know, but I didn't want a solution. I wanted her gone, completely gone. Because as long as she was around, you'd have someone who knew you before you were successful, someone who could see through my act. Claire smiled bitterly. Turns out, she saw through it anyway. I didn't want to, I said honestly. I wanted to believe you were good for my son. I wanted to trust you. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to you, for what I did to David, for stealing from all those people. I'm sorry for using Robert's death as part of my scam. That was... Her voice broke. That was unforgivable. We sat in silence for a moment. The visiting room hummed with the quiet conversations of other inmates and their visitors. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Claire said finally. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I did. I understand how much I hurt you both. And if I could go back and do things differently, I would. I'd be honest from the start. I'd tell you that I was scared and insecure and didn't know how to just be a normal person. Maybe you would have helped me. Maybe we could have had something real. Maybe, David said quietly. But we'll never know now. No, we won't. Claire stood up. Thank you for coming, for listening. I don't expect you to visit again. I don't expect anything. I just needed to say this, to have it be real for once in my life. As she turned to leave, I found myself speaking up. Claire? She turned back. I hope you find yourself in here, the real you, whoever that is. Everyone deserves that. For the first time since I'd known her, Claire's smile looked genuine, sad but genuine. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. That's kinder than I deserve. We watched her walk away, escorted by a guard back into the depths of the prison. David and I sat there for a moment, not quite ready to leave. Do you believe her? He asked finally. That she's really sorry? I considered it carefully. I think she's sorry about where her choices led her. Whether she truly understands the harm she caused, or is just sorry she got caught, I'm not sure. But I think she's trying to understand. Maybe that's the best we can hope for. David nodded slowly. I feel sorry for her. Is that strange? After everything she did, part of me still feels sorry for her. It's not strange. It means you're a good person with empathy. Your father was the same way. We drove home mostly in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. That visit felt like a final chapter closing, a last conversation that needed to happen before we could truly move forward. Spring arrived in Charleston with an explosion of azaleas and dogwoods. The garden David and I had planted was coming to life, and I spent hours each day tending to it, my hands in the soil, the sun warm on my back. Sarah had become a regular presence in our lives. She and David were serious now, talking about the future. She'd helped me set up my first art show at a local gallery. Just a small collection of my paintings, mostly landscapes and still lifes. "Your mother has real talent," Sarah told David at the opening. "These are beautiful." David put his arm around my shoulders. "She's always been talented. We just never had time to see it before." Many of my old friends from Charleston came, including some of the women who'd believed Claire's lies.